There are moments in life when you realize that the universe has a twisted sense of humor. Some people have this epiphany when they step on a Lego in the middle of the night. Others, when they sit down in a public restroom only to realize there's no toilet paper. For me, it was on my 40th birthday. Now, I've never been big on birthdays. I don't need a parade or a skywriter spelling out, "Happy Birthday, Thomas," in the clouds. But this year, Mary insisted on throwing me a party. Just a small thing, she'd said. Close friends, good food, nothing over the top. That should have been my first red flag. Mary wasn't the kind of woman who did anything small. When she planned Thanksgiving dinner, it looked like a Michelin star chef had gone on a cooking bender. A simple summer picnic, mint imported cheeses, artisan bread, and a spreadsheet of seating arrangements. So when she promised a small birthday party, I should have known something was up, but I didn't. Because, like a moron, I actually believed my wife wanted to do something nice for me. So there I was, standing in our living room, surrounded by people I hadn't seen since the Bush administration, listening to them tell me how great I looked. Which, in middle-aged man speak, means, wow, you survived another year without completely falling apart. And then came the cake. Now, Mary has never baked a cake in her life. She considers the oven a glorified storage unit. So when she walked out holding a homemade chocolate cake, something didn't sit right. It was beautifully frosted, perfectly shaped, almost too perfect, like it had been airbrushed by a team of dessert professionals. "Wow, Mary," I said, eyeing the suspiciously perfect cake. "Did you bake this yourself, or did you hold a hostage at a bakery?" She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that people do when they don't really find something funny. Just a little too forced. I took a bite. It was amazing. Too amazing. "All right," I said, chewing. "Who actually made this?" Silence. Mary shifted on her feet. And then, from the back of the room, a voice chimed in. "I did." I turned, and there he was. Chris Carmichael. Tall, good-looking in a gym membership commercial kind of way, and standing in my house, holding a glass of my whiskey, like he'd been invited. Which, apparently, he had been. Chris was Mary's personal trainer, the guy she had been seeing 3 times a week for the past 6 months because, according to her, it's important to stay fit after 35. Now, I'm not a suspicious man by nature, but I am a man who watches movies. And if there's one universal truth in cinema, it's that when a woman gets too into fitness all of a sudden, she's either training for the Olympics or sleeping with her personal trainer. Spoiler alert, Mary was not training for the Olympics. "Well, isn't that just fantastic?" I said, setting down my fork. "My wife's personal trainer made my birthday cake. That's totally normal." Chris grinned, like a moron who had no idea he just walked into a minefield. "Mary told me chocolate was your favorite." "Oh, she did. Did she?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "You two talk about my favorite things a lot?" Mary shot me a look. "Thomas, don't be ridiculous." "Ridiculous? Me? Oh, that was rich." Chris took a sip of his drink, still blissfully unaware that he was one sentence away from becoming part of a true crime documentary. "I just wanted to do something nice, man. Mary mentioned how much you love homemade desserts, and I thought, hey, why not?" "Yeah," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Why not? What could be more appropriate than my wife's personal trainer baking me a cake?" The room had gone quiet. People were shifting uncomfortably. My best friend, Dave, was slowly reaching for another beer, like he was watching a live-action soap opera and needed refreshments. Mary placed a hand on my arm. "Thomas, can we talk for a second?" Now, here's where a smarter man might have just smiled, nodded, and kept the peace for the sake of the party. I am not that man. Instead, I stood up, clinked my glass with a spoon, and said, "Actually, Mary, I have a better idea. Since we're celebrating my life today, why don't we all play a game? Let's call it How Long Has Thomas Been a Complete Fool?" "Thomas," she hissed through gritted teeth. Chris looked confused, like a golden retriever trying to understand calculus. I turned to him. "Hey, Chris, quick question. When did you and my wife start baking together?" He blinked. I mean, I don't know exactly." "Sure you do," I said. "Because, see, I've been doing some math in my head. Mary started training with you in April. That's 6 months ago. And in those 6 months, she's been leaving the house in new workout outfits, coming home all glowing, and now, you're baking cakes for family events? Mary's face was pale. Chris's grip on his glass tightened. You know what? I continued, the pieces finally clicking together in my brain. Forget the cake. I have a better question. Chris, do you usually work out at the Lombard Hotel? Because Mary sure has been spending a lot of time there. Boom. Silence. Mary's face drained of color. Chris coughed, suddenly very interested in the floor. And that's when I knew. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. My wife had been working out in more ways than one. Well, I said, grabbing another drink, this is definitely my most memorable birthday. Chris looked like he wanted to melt into the carpet. Mary? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. And me? I just sat down, took another bite of that stupid cake, and laughed. Because sometimes, the universe really knows how to throw a surprise party. The worst thing about discovering your wife is cheating on you isn't the betrayal itself. It's the realization that you've been the dumbest person in the room for an embarrassing amount of time. And not just a little dumb. No, I'm talking about full-blown, award-winning stupidity. The kind of stupidity that makes people in crime documentaries shake their heads and say, how did he not see it? Now, I'm not a stupid, at least, not in most areas of life. I pay my bills, I know how to fix a leaky sink, and I can set up a Wi-Fi router without calling tech support. But when it came to Mary, oh, I was a first-class fool, and I had been for months. Because once you know the truth, once you really look at everything, it all becomes laughably obvious. Like the fact that Mary had started wearing matching workout sets, something she used to call a waste of money, because who cares if your leggings match your top when you're just going to sweat in them? Apparently, Chris cared. Or how she suddenly needed to shower before she got home from the gym. I just don't want to sweat all over the car, she'd said. Right. Because after a decade of driving home drenched in post-cardio misery, she had just now developed a concern for the cleanliness of her seatbelt. Then there was the real kicker, the hotel. I hadn't figured it out at first, but after my birthday party turned into an impromptu episode of Cheaters, my brain started working overtime. The Lombard Hotel wasn't just any hotel. It was a business-class hotel, the kind of place people stayed when they were traveling for work and needed something comfortable but professional. Which was funny, considering Mary hadn't had a job that required travel in the past 5 years. So why had she been there? That question burned a hole in my brain until I did what any man with a decent internet connection and too much free time would do. I looked up our credit card statements. Now, let me tell you something about Mary. She's smart. Not evil genius smart, but never forgets a coupon code smart. She knew better than to leave obvious charges on our joint account. But personal trainers aren't cheap, and I knew she wasn't paying Chris in baked goods. So I checked her personal credit card. And there it was. The Lombard Hotel. Room charges. Multiple times a month for the past 6 months. And not just on random weekdays. No. That would have been too predictable. These charges always appeared on the same days I had late meetings. The days I texted her, saying, don't wait up, it's gonna be a long one. And she had responded with, no problem, babe. Hope it's not too stressful. She had been setting up her little extracurricular activities like she was scheduling a doctor's appointment, right down to checking my calendar first. The efficiency of it almost made me proud. Almost. But it still didn't tell me everything. Because sure, she was meeting Chris at the hotel. But how far had it really gone? Was this just some weird fitness-obsessed midlife crisis? Was she using him for workouts, flirtation, and the occasional homemade cake? Or was I, in fact, the reigning champion of most pathetic husband of the year? There was only one way to find out. Now, I could have done the normal thing, confronted her directly, demanded the truth. But the problem with liars is that they don't stop lying just because you ask nicely. No, they twist things, they gaslight, they cry, they make you feel like you're the crazy one. So I needed proof. Real proof. And lucky for me, I had an idea. Mary's a creature of habit. She always checks into the Lombard on Thursdays. That gave me 5 days to prepare. So I did what any respectable man would do in my situation. I took a day off work, borrowed my brother's old car, so she wouldn't recognize mine. and parked across the street from the hotel on a Thursday evening, armed with nothing but a baseball cap, sunglasses, and a steaming cup of regret. I expected to see her pull up alone. Maybe Chris would arrive separately, maybe they'd meet at the entrance. What I didn't expect was what actually happened. Because when Mary's car rolled into the parking lot, she wasn't alone. There was someone in the passenger seat. And it wasn't Chris. It was someone else entirely. A man, mid-40s, broad shoulders, button-down shirt, loosened tie. The kind of guy who looked like he'd just come from a corporate meeting, but had no intention of going home to his wife. I stared. Mary parked, turned to him, and they talked for a moment. Then she laughed, like this was the most normal thing in the world. Then, without hesitation, she grabbed her purse, stepped out of the car, and the two of them walked into the hotel together. And just like that, my brain broke. Because Chris, I could almost understand. The personal trainer trope is as old as time. But this was something else. Something bigger. Something that smelled less like fling and more like business. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Because I wasn't just dealing with an affair. I was dealing with a pattern. And Mary? She wasn't just cheating. She was practiced at it. Sitting in my brother's old car outside the Lombard, watching my wife waltz into a hotel with a man who wasn't Chris, I had a moment of absolute, crystal-clear realization. Mary wasn't just having an affair. She was managing one. No, scratch that. She was managing several. And I had been living in a state of ignorant bliss, paying for our mortgage, making her coffee every morning, and going to sleep next to a woman who apparently had a more packed schedule than a presidential candidate. The worst part? This wasn't even shocking anymore. It was just insulting. Chris was one thing. A personal trainer cliché. Predictable. But this guy? This was a whole new level of deceit. Button-down shirt, confident stride. The way he touched the small of her back as they walked inside? That wasn't just some random hotel hookup. That was routine. And that meant one thing. I had absolutely no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. So, naturally, I did the only thing a self-respecting husband would do. I got out of the car and followed them in. Now, let me make one thing clear. I didn't have a plan. Not even a little bit. I wasn't here to cause a scene, flip over tables, or demand satisfaction like some 18th century duelist. I just needed to see how far this went. I needed confirmation that my wife, the woman I had spent 10 years with, the woman who once cried because she thought she lost her wedding ring, had been juggling men like some kind of morally bankrupt circus performer. I walked into the lobby like I belonged there, keeping my head down just enough to stay unnoticed. Mary and her date were at the front desk, chatting with the receptionist, looking every bit like a couple checking in for an important business meeting. If business meetings involved overnight bags and hotel key cards. Then something even better happened. As I was trying to blend into the background, I noticed someone else. Someone very familiar. Chris. Yes, that Chris. The fitness guru, the cake-baking personal trainer, the man who had probably adjusted my wife's form in ways I never wanted to think about. He wasn't in workout gear now. He was in regular clothes, scrolling on his phone near the elevator, looking completely comfortable, like a man who had been here before. And suddenly, it all clicked. Chris wasn't just here. Chris was waiting for someone. And unless there was a convention for married women's personal trainers happening at this hotel, there was a very real possibility that Chris was waiting for Mary, which meant one of two things. Either Mary was the worst cheater in history and had accidentally scheduled 2 of her extracurricular activities at the same time, or she was running a full-on operation. I leaned against the wall, my heart doing something between a marathon and a nervous breakdown. And then, just when I thought this couldn't get any more ridiculous, Mary turned around and froze. I wish I could describe the exact facial expression she made, but it was a complicated mix of shock, guilt, and the kind of horror someone experiences when they realize they just lost a bet they were very confident in. Chris looked up from his phone, following her gaze. Then he saw me, and suddenly, the whole room became a silent, awkward mess of realization. Mary's new date had no idea what was going on yet. He was still smiling, still holding their key card like they were about to head upstairs for a relaxing evening. Chris, however, Chris knew. And I knew he knew. And Mary? She looked like she was considering whether or not she could fake a seizure to get out of this situation. I gave her a slow nod, the kind of nod that says, "Oh, don't worry, I'm enjoying this as much as you are." Then, to make things even better, Chris, either because he was a moron or because he had truly underestimated the absurdity of this situation, decided to speak first. "Hey, man, what are you doing here?" And that was it. That was the moment I officially snapped. I laughed. Not a normal laugh. No, this was the kind of laugh that happens when your brain just completely gives up. "What am I doing here?" I repeated, wiping at my eye like I had just heard the funniest joke of my life. "I could ask you the same thing, Chris. You, meeting someone?" Chris opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Mary, who had clearly decided that pretending to be dead wasn't an option, finally took a step forward, grabbing my arm. "Thomas," she said, voice low, as if she could somehow contain this situation. "Let's talk. Alone." I shrugged her off. "Oh, no, no, no. We don't need to be alone. This is fascinating. You and—" I gestured toward business casual Romeo, who was now looking between us like he had wandered into a hostage situation. "And this guy, huh? What's the story there? I'm just dying to know." Her date, still blissfully unaware of the full scope of the disaster unfolding, smiled awkwardly. "Oh, we work together." "Oh, do you?" I nodded. "That's so interesting, because my wife here, she works from home." The poor man's smile faded real fast. I turned back to Chris, who still looked like he was debating whether or not to make a run for it. "And you?" I asked. "You, here for the work meeting too?" Chris swallowed hard. Look, man, I don't want to get in the middle of—" I clapped my hands. "Oh, buddy, it is way too late for that." Mary had officially run out of ideas. Her hands were clenched, her eyes darting between me, Chris, and Mystery Man like she was searching for an escape route that didn't exist. And me? I just smiled. Because at that moment, I realized something. This wasn't a tragic, heartbreaking discovery. This wasn't the end of my world. This was a spectacle. And if my wife was going to turn our marriage into a circus, I was going to make sure she got the full audience experience. Standing in that hotel lobby, watching my wife, her business partner, and her personal trainer all trying to figure out how to escape the disaster they had collectively created, I had a realization. Mary wasn't just cheating. She was invested in it. She had built a system. This wasn't some impulsive mistake, a moment of weakness, or even a reckless fling. No, she was running a full-scale operation, and that meant she had spent months, possibly years, looking me in the eye, sharing a bed with me, pretending that I was the love of her life, all while juggling her little extracurricular activities like she was managing a second job. That needed consequences. Now, I could have gone for the traditional approach, yelled, made a scene, filed for divorce the next morning, and let her deal with the fallout. But that would have been too easy, too expected. And Mary? Mary had spent too long assuming she was the smartest person in the room. It was time to let her know she wasn't. So instead of losing my temper, I took a step back, stuffed my hands in my pockets, and smiled. A calm, friendly smile. The kind of smile that says, "Oh, don't mind me. I'm just here to enjoy the show." Mary, now looking more nervous than a politician at a lie detector test, took another shaky step toward me. "Thomas," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk in private?" I tilted my head, pretending to think about it. "Oh, I'd love to, sweetheart. Really, I would. But see, I feel like this is a group activity now, and I wouldn't want to leave anyone out." Chris shifted uncomfortably, still holding his phone like it might save him. Business guy, who, by the way, still hadn't even asked for Mary's name, which told me everything I needed to know about his role in all of this, took a step back, probably reconsidering every decision that had led him here. I clapped my hands together, startling them all. "All right, here's how this is going to go. Mary, my wonderful, completely trustworthy wife, is going to go home and pack a bag. Because, and I know this is shocking, she's not going to be living in my house anymore." "Thomas." No, let me finish, darling. I've been interrupted enough tonight. I turned to Chris. And you? You're going to head back to the gym and find a new client to take advantage of. Maybe one who isn't married. Maybe, just a suggestion here, someone who actually likes your cake. Chris, who had clearly expected a much bigger reaction from me, nodded and muttered something about leaving. I looked back at Mary. As for you, dear wife, you're going to pack your things, and then you're going to sit by your phone and wait. Because I'm not going to file for divorce just yet. No, no, that would be too simple. Her eyes darted around, her breathing uneven. Thomas, please, let's not do this here. Oh, we are doing this here, I said, still smiling. See, you didn't just betray me. You insulted me. You assumed I was stupid. You built a schedule around my absence. You planned this like it was a project at work. And I have to say, I admire the commitment. So much so that I think you deserve a proper farewell. And that's when I pulled out my phone. Mary's face lost all color. Now, I continued, tapping my screen, I could just tell your family and friends what you've been up to. I could let them all know how you've been managing your time so efficiently. But why settle for words when I can show them something better? I turned my screen toward her. A video, taken right there in the hotel lobby, of her, standing between her two secret companions, looking guilty as sin. Her mouth fell open. You filmed this? I shrugged. Well, it just felt right. After all, you've been running a whole show here. Might as well let the audience in on it. Business guy finally decided this was not worth his time and practically ran for the exit. Chris followed, still looking like he was trying to process his life choices. Mary? She just stood there, frozen. Here's the deal, I said, pocketing my phone. You're going to pack your things. You're going to leave quietly. And you're going to hope, really, really hope, that I don't decide to send this video to every single person we know. Her hands were shaking. Thomas, please, Oh, now you want to talk? I let out a laugh. That's adorable. And with that, I turned on my heel and walked out of the hotel. Because Mary wasn't just going to lose me. She was going to lose everything. Mary was gone when I got home. I half expected to find her waiting for me, sitting on the couch with one of those dramatic, self-pitying expressions people use when they're about to beg for mercy. But no, she had actually listened. Maybe it was the video, or maybe she just realized that after tonight, there were no sweet-talking her way out of this. Either way, the house was quiet, and for the first time in years, it actually felt like mine. Not ours. Mine. Her closet was still full. Her things were still in the bathroom. But that didn't matter. I had no doubt she'd be back soon to collect it all, probably after she figured out what version of the truth she wanted to peddle to the people in her life who still didn't know she was a full-time hobbyist in betrayal. Which reminded me, I had work to do. See, throwing her out was only step one. That was just the warm-up. The real fun was just getting started. Mary had built her life around careful lies. She curated her little secret world with the same dedication as someone assembling a collection of rare art. Each man, each excuse, each story, carefully placed, adjusted, perfected. So I did what any man in my position would do. I burned it all down. It started with her family. Mary came from one of those families that looked like they were ripped straight out of a holiday commercial. Polite, respectable, the kind of people who spent way too much time discussing what shade of beige was appropriate for their dining room walls. They loved me. Always had. Her mother would call me just to chat. Her father constantly reminded me that I was the best thing that ever happened to his daughter. I figured they deserved the truth. I sent them the video first. No context, no explanation. Just a simple message. I thought you should know what your daughter has been up to. This is why she won't be living here anymore. And then, I blocked them, because I knew exactly how that conversation would go. First, shock. Then, panic. Then, calls. Maybe even a visit. And I didn't care for any of it. Let them process it however they wanted. I wasn't interested in their damage control. Next, I moved on to the social side of things. Mary had a group of friends she liked to pretend were her sisters. You know the type. Brunch selfies, matching robes for bachelorette parties, dramatic birthday posts about being so lucky to have such an amazing support system. Of course, what she didn't tell them was that half of them had boyfriends or husbands she had been hitting on at one point or another. So I did what any good husband would do. I sent the video to their group chat, followed by a second message. If you ever wondered why Mary was so interested in checking in on your relationships, now you know. The chat exploded within minutes. Messages pouring in, some of them horrified, some of them furious. One of them, I won't name names, just sent back a simple, "I knew it." And that made my night. But I wasn't done. See, Mary was a planner. She had systems in place. And if I really wanted to make sure she felt the full weight of her mistakes, I needed to target those. That's when I remembered something beautiful. Mary had a work event coming up. Not just any work event, a big one. The kind that involved fancy venues, expensive dinners, and executives who needed to be impressed. She had been talking about it for weeks. Something about how she needed to make the right connections to secure a promotion she had been aiming for. And I had just the thing to make that evening extra memorable. I sent the video to her boss. But I didn't just send the video. I sent an email. A well-crafted, polite, professional email. Dear boss's name. I wanted to reach out regarding an issue that I believe may affect the company's reputation. I recently discovered that my wife, Mary last name, has been engaging in multiple extramarital relationships, some of which may involve individuals connected to your firm. I understand that personal matters should remain separate from work, but considering the upcoming event and Mary's current position, I felt it was important to ensure that those in leadership are aware of the potential risks involved. Please let me know if you would like any additional context. I would be happy to provide further details if necessary. Best regards, Thomas, last name? Now, will that get her fired? Maybe, maybe not. But will it make things extremely uncomfortable for her at work? Absolutely. And I was just fine with that. By the time I was done, I sat back in my chair, exhaled, and realized something. I wasn't even angry anymore. I thought I would be. I thought I would still be burning with rage, with betrayal, with the kind of seething resentment that eats people alive. But no, I just felt done. Because for the first time in a long time, I was in control. Mary had spent so much time thinking she was untouchable, that she could juggle all of this without consequences, that I would always be there, waiting, ignorant and loyal. She was wrong. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, she was going to wake up in the wreckage of her own decisions. Mary wasn't the kind of person who knew how to lose. She had spent her whole life calculating, adjusting, making sure she was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. It was a skill she used in her career, in her friendships, and apparently, in her hobby of collecting men like they were limited edition sneakers. So when she finally called me, 2 days after I had dismantled her personal and professional life, I knew exactly how this was going to go. She was going to try to negotiate. "Thomas," she said when I picked up, her voice already laced with desperation, can we please talk?" "Oh, absolutely," I said, leaning back in my chair. "In fact, I'd love to talk. Should we start with your work situation? Or would you prefer we discuss why half of your friends are currently voting you out of their lives?" She exhaled sharply. "I know you're angry." "Oh, no, no, no. We're past angry, Mary. We're in the results phase now. I don't understand why you're doing this." And that made me laugh. "You don't understand?" I repeated. "Let's recap, shall we? You had multiple affairs. You planned them with the kind of precision that most people reserve for military operations. You used our home, our relationship, and my trust as nothing more than a convenient cover for your extracurriculars. And you don't understand why I did this?" She went quiet. "Let me guess," I continued. "You thought I'd yell, maybe throw some things, storm out, file for divorce, and then disappear into the background so you could spin this into some tragic story about how our marriage just wasn't working. That about right?" She didn't answer, which meant I had hit the nail right on the head. "Thing is, Mary, you're not the victim here. I know you want to be. I know you need to be, because that's the only way you can stomach what you've done. But you're not." She sniffed. "You don't understand, Thomas. It wasn't about hurting you." "Oh, no doubt," I said. "I'm sure I was just a minor inconvenience in all of this. But unfortunately, You did pick a husband with enough self-respect to not just roll over and take it. Silence. Where are you staying? She finally asked, voice softer now. That made me smile. Oh, now you care? It's not. No, no, I love this, I said. Let's go down this road. Do you want me to tell you I'm miserable? That I'm lost without you? That I spend every night staring at the ceiling, wondering where it all went wrong? She hesitated. I cut her off. I'm fine, Mary. In fact, I'm better than fine. I'm free. I don't have to sit across from you at dinner anymore, pretending not to notice the way you check your phone like you're waiting for an emergency that never comes. I don't have to wonder why you're suddenly obsessed with fitness or why your business trips never involve actual work. I don't have to pretend anymore. I never wanted it to end like this, she whispered. And there it was. Regret. Not for the cheating, not for the lies, but for the fact that she lost. I let out a breath. You know what, Mary? I believe you. She seemed caught off guard by that. You do? Oh, yeah, I said. I believe you wanted to keep everything. The marriage, the house, the stability, while also getting to live out your little side adventures. You didn't want to lose anything. You just didn't think you'd ever have to choose. Another stretch of silence. Thomas, what happens now? And that was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? I could have dragged this out longer, kept the pressure on, watched her squirm while the consequences of her actions fully settled in. But honestly, I was done. Now, I said, you go pack up whatever you still have left in the house. I'll be filing for divorce, and you're going to sign the papers without making this difficult. No begging, no bargaining, no ridiculous attempts to work things out. Her breath hitched. Thomas. No, I interrupted. You don't get to talk your way out of this. You don't get to manipulate this into some kind of emotional reunion. You made your choices, and now you live with them. She swallowed hard. You really won't even consider. No, I said, standing up and stretching like I had just finished a long but satisfying project. But I will tell you one last thing. She waited. I hope it was worth it. And with that, I hung up, and finally, for the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I had one. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel,